Hey guys, and welcome to this episode of AEIOU. In case you haven't noticed yet, we'll be teaching you how to make your own lightsabers using Adobe After Effects. After this tutorial, you should end up with something like this. Let's get started. First thing we'll want to do is create a new composition. I'll be using these settings. Now we import the video file we're going to work with. Then drag it onto the stage. And there we go. Doesn't quite fit. You could use Ctrl Alt F to make it fit into the composition automatically. Now the footage we're working with is essentially Gab spinning his lightsaber. That's a monopod, by the way, in case you were wondering. Now what I like about this effect is that it's actually really easy. In a sense, all we have to do is trace a white solid over the selfie saber and add some effects later. They call it rotoscoping. You wouldn't generally need any of the more advanced techniques like 3D tracking and whatnot. You'll see what I mean. So we create a new solid and we'll go with these settings. Make sure it's the comp size and we want a white solid. Now hide the solid and get your pen tool and you could zoom in if you want. And essentially the general idea is to trace over our prop where you'd want the glow of the lightsaber to show up later on. Now try to cover it up as much as possible. And once you're done tracing, make sure the solid is selected. Hit the M key twice to bring up the mask path. You could also do it manually. And next to mask path, click on the stopwatch. So we'll add a keyframe at this frame. Now you'll want to move a few frames forward and add another keyframe. And we'll have to adjust the mask over the lightsaber. There isn't much to adjust as the lightsaber didn't really move that much. By the way, how I scroll up like this while zoomed in, I use the middle mouse, just push it down. It'll be extremely useful here. Now we're gonna move a few more frames forward again, and as you can see, the mask is kind of off the lightsaber. Now we're just gonna update it again and adjust it to cover up the lightsaber. Now by now you might be getting the general idea of what we're trying to do. Essentially, as much as possible for every frame, we're gonna want to have this mask on top of the lightsaber. Well, monopod, but whatever. Now if we make the mask visible again, let's see what we have so far. Okay. Now there isn't really much movement as of now, so it's not terribly obvious. Okay, let me just fast forward a bit. Now if you skip a few frames forward, at times you may have to go back and polish the masking of the in frames in between, because in between keyframes After Effects kind of interpolates where the mask would go, but it's not exactly perfect. It's a bit off sometimes, so you may have to edit each individual frame in the end, though if you're lucky you could get away with it. Now here's where I realized I failed a bit. The selfie stick isn't exactly the best idea of a prop. It's hard to see while it's moving. As you can see here, it's kind of not too visible where it is right now. I would suggest next time perhaps try something, perhaps a red stick or something with a strong color. Though if you have an actual lightsaber toy, why not? You might also notice that if the saber is blurred, I trace the entire blur. I don't just trace the front where I think the saber actually is. This is actually because once we move on to the next step, it's actually gonna look much more like an actual lightsaber. You'll see why later on. So from here on out, you're just gonna keep tracing over the lightsaber. And yes, it might be quite repetitive, but I assure you the end result is worth it. Any minute now. Now, once you're done, you can see you have quite a lot of keyframes. This is what it looks like. Not quite the lightsaber yet, but as you can see, it's getting there. The one thing about the lightsaber right now, it's kind of flat. So what we could do about this is to add a mask feather, a couple of pixels. You'll have to experiment a bit. Eventually, I ended up with 2.5 pixels, but that really depends on your shot. A closer lightsaber might need more pixels. That's my guess. I've never really tried. Okay, now that looks better. Now the next thing we'll want to do is to round the tip of the lightsaber. It'll look a lot more lightsabery that way. To do that, we select the pen tool, hold it, and select the convert vertex tool. Now we click on the middle here where you want to add a new point and just hold and drag it like so. Release. Now have your selection tool or use the shortcut key V and just pull it up like that. There we go. Now it's a little more curved. Now the bad news is, yes, you're gonna have to do that for every frame again. Sorry. You may also have to retouch a bit. It just doesn't work out sometimes. There we go. Yeah. Every frame. Okay. Uh, yeah. But you should be getting the general idea from by now. I'll just skip this part. So once you're done with that, give yourself a pat on the back. You can move on to the real fun part, creating the glow. With your white solid, hit Control D and make a couple of copies. Select your second white solid and go to the Effects and Presets tab and search for Fast Blur. Click and drag that effect onto your second layer. I'm just gonna hide the mask pass, we won't really need it anymore. Now click on Repeat Edge Pixels and set your blurriness to 10. Then, okay, maybe I should have copied this layer instead. Now for the other two copies of the white solid, give it a different blurriness. Let's say around, for each succeeding white solid, I gave it an incremental value for blurriness. I experimented a bit, but eventually I ended up with 10, 20, and 40. Now once you're done, you should end up with something like this. Now it's really starting to look like a lightsaber. Now the last step we'll want to do is to give it a color. Now to do that, once again, we'll create a new solid. Though this time we'll have it black. Put it below all your lightsaber layers. Now hold shift and select the top, select everything. Now we'll want to right click, then pre-compose. It's essentially like groups all those layers together. Okay. Now we're gonna toggle switches and modes and set the mode to screen. Next, with the lightsaber layer selected, we're gonna go to effect and then color correction. then curve. And now say I want a red saber. I'm gonna go set the channel from RGB to red, and I'm just gonna add some red. This takes some playing around with as well. Then other colors you don't want, just lower the curve. Now once you're happy with the color you've come up with, try playing your composition, and there you go. And that's that, ladies and gentlemen. That's how you create some lightsabers in After Effects. Hope you enjoyed the episode, and see you next time in AEIOU.